gentlemen, welcome to another edition on my Fiesta ST180 series. Now in today's video I'm actually going to be upgrading the brakes, the front brake pads on this car. Okay, so at the moment the brake pads that are on there are the Ford Motorcraft items, and essentially they're good for general day-to-day driving, but if you want a pad which is more suited for fast road use and for taking the car onto the track, then you need to obviously upgrade the pad. So I've been doing a fair bit of research, and what has come to my mind and what's come from the research is EBC RP-1 track pads, okay, or brake pads. They are meant to be very good at resisting fade, and they're very good in terms of the pedal feel that they give as well, quite a good progressive pedal feel. Now those pads, you also get the EBC RP-X, sorry, which is the one slightly up from the RP1, but really that's a much more focused trackpad. For me, I wanted something that works well on the road as well, so I've gone for the EBC RP1s. It's going to be really interesting to see how they actually compare to the standard Ford Motorcraft items. They're going to be on the standard discs. I'm not going to upgrade the discs. The discs are actually fine, they don't really need changing. The pads were wearing a little bit thin, so I'm going to get on to changing the pads now, and of course, as always, I'm going to give you my honest opinion and review on how they actually feel in the car and what we actually need to do to bed those pads in as well, following EBC's brake bedding procedures. So the first thing that we need to do is get the caliper off, and for that we need a 17mm spanner to go onto this nut here, and then we basically use the bolt on the back using a 13mm spanner, 13mm socket. So I've got this on my impact wrench, so let's whack this onto here. And we're going to do the same at the bottom just here. And then what we can actually do is actually just free off the caliper. Okay, so I'm just going to take this off exactly like this, and we'll have to wind down the caliper piston. Now what I'm going to do is just pop this onto here for now, so that we don't actually have any weight on the brake hose, and then what we're going to do is just pop out these pads and have a look. So you can see here, these are wearing quite thin. These are the standard Motorcraft pads, very thin. They've certainly given their life, and what I normally like to do is pop this one here, is just check this one, because I reckon this side was making a bit of a noise, and lo and behold, this side is almost down to the metal. So I was getting a noise on hard braking recently, just very recently, and I was thinking the outer one looks fine, that's the one that I can see, but the inner one, there must be only a little bit of pad life. There must only be a little bit of pad left, and it's literally just finished. So I'm really pleased that I'm changing these at the right time. So get rid of these and we move on to the next step. Okay, so the next job, now we've got the brake pads off, is to get those slider pins out. So if we have a look here again, these slider pins are prone to seizing, but when I changed my brake pads last year, I actually got some brand new Frentec ones. So I'm going to just pull these out now and have a look. So come out with the rubber. These are actually not in bad condition. Let's just pull this rubber out. I used some Castrol red rubber grease, so these are actually not seized in any way. So I'm going to just whack this one here, and I'm also going to then take out this one as well. Again, this one's okay, so a little bit of a clean. I give these a good little clean. So once they've had a clean, once these have had a good clean, you can actually just see some of the red rubber grease is still intact on this sliding pin, and the brakes have been working fantastically. So what I'm going to do now is, I've got my brake clean, I'm going to give all this whole area a good clean, and then I can actually get those pins back in, new pads, put the caliper on. Really quick 10-minute job this is, so I'll carry on and do that. So I'm also just going to give this area a bit of a dousing in brake fluid is brake cleaner, especially these parts here, which is where the brake pads will go. So it's important to give them a really good clean. Just get rid of all of the brake dust, and this way we ensure that we have a nice clean operating area for those new pads to work how they should do. Okay, so with the guide pins now clean and that whole area nice and clean, what I'm going to do next is actually get some Castrol red rubber grease. Okay, so I've got this here. Now the reason why we use red rubber grease, or silicone grease as it's known, is because it protects this rubber from rotting. In essence, you can actually use Ceratec as well, although I use Ceratec for behind the brake pads, as we'll see in just a moment, and where the brake pad pins go on the assembly. But for the slider pins, I'm just going to put a liberal coating of this silicone grease. So I've got my disposable gloves on because I'll just get rid of those. You don't want to get grease onto the brake pad surface or onto the disc. So I'm just going to make sure that these are covered all over, that there's good grease all over, and that should hopefully last me until at least the next brake pad change. Stop it from seizing, stop it from rusting. Those are actually in excellent condition. So those Frentec brake slider pins are actually a really good investment. If yours are rusty or they're seized up, get them out, get these ones in. This is about 1.5 years since I put these in, and these came out, as you saw, spotless. Okay, now before I put the new brake pads in, I've actually got to wind back the piston, because obviously as the pad starts wearing, the piston moves forward. We've got to push it all the way back so that we can actually get the new pads in and slide the caliper back on. So to do that, what I first do is always remove the cap from the brake fluid reservoir, because essentially as you're pushing the piston back, the fluid is going to come back up here. Now sometimes it's a good idea just to put some towel or like a cloth here, so that if any brake fluid comes above the reservoir, it doesn't spill onto the bodywork or any other of the components. In my case, I'm not too worried. I'll be pushing the piston back, and I'm just going to monitor it. I think it will be absolutely fine without having to put anything there. So I'm now going to get on to winding those pistons back. So I've got my G-clamp, I'm just winding it back a little bit to create some space. This is going to go onto the inside of the piston, and this is going to go on the back of the piston. Then I just make sure it's nice and secure. So just give it another little tug, and then essentially now what you can see is I'm going to keep it in this position for ease, but I'm basically now just pushing clockwise, and what this is going to be doing is moving the piston inwards. It's going to be pushing that piston. It's actually quite easy on the front. For the rears, you actually need a special tool, and when you have that tool, it goes into the special groove. Now this has gone all the way in, so we can actually see the piston is now completely at a level with this housing here. So give it a little bit more, but I'm quite happy with that going in. So that's the piston now in. I'm going to go and do that on the other side as well, and now this caliper is ready to put on once we get the brake pads into the right position. Okay, it's time now to get these slider pins back in, so they're all lubed in, and essentially I'm just going to, I've got the first one in there here, so we just pop that in, make sure the rubber boot actually attaches to this carrier bracket here, and then really they should just move nice and freely. Okay, so here as well you can see that the grease enables them to move quite freely, because this is what's going to allow the pads to move away from the surface of the disc as well once the pads have been applied, and then they move away. So you've got this built-in movement into this housing here. So they're all great. Now what's interesting is, so far I hadn't actually shown you the pads, and that was because while I started this job I thought I'd get the preliminary stuff done. I knew they were out for delivery today from EBC, so the driver was on his way. He's just came and he's dropped them off. So this is it. These are the RP-X pads, looking fantastic. Plenty of meat on those, and hopefully some very good braking to come from these pads. So the pad itself, which we can see here, is actually it's got this metal plate, and this is the markings are laser etched on there, and obviously you've got the actual friction material here. So this is going to withstand, I think, 800 degrees Celsius of brake temperatures. So when you're doing track work, obviously you're going to be building up a lot of heat very quickly. But I also think when you're doing fast road driving on country roads, A and B roads, where you're constantly using the brakes, especially on a car which has a stage 1 or 2 remap, then you do need to operate the brakes, because they can actually build up quite a lot of heat. So by having a pad like this, you're going to reduce your chances of having any kind of fade from the brake pads heating the disc and becoming too hot, and then you start to get that fade. And combined with some good fluids, so this car's got RBF 660, Motel RBF 660, and it's got the Hell braided lines. That would basically mean that you've got a perfect setup for fast road use, and you don't necessarily need to spend $1.5 grand, $2 grand on a big brake kit, which you can get, and that would sort out a lot of the issues. But certainly for fast road use, this is going to be a hell of a pad. So we'll get these fitted, and then it will be a case of actually taking the car for a drive and seeing how they actually feel. So what I'm going to do now is I've got my Ceratec grease, so I'm going to apply some to the back of the pad. So this is the part where the piston makes contact, and you basically want to make this you want to apply this quite liberally, because you don't want brake squeals. So if you don't put this grease on, then essentially what's going to happen is you're going to get quite a lot of brake squeal every time you apply the pads. I also get a little bit of on the ends here, a little bit on the ends that are going to go into the housing here. And then what I do is I just squeeze a little bit onto the finger, some there, careful not to get it onto the brake disc, some here, and then we just get some on the inside there. Make sure that's there, just a tiny little bit more. You don't need to over apply this, just make sure that it's on the ridge here. So now I know that there's plenty of grease. Careful not to get it onto the pad material, that's got to stay grease free. So I'm just going to make sure, just double check again, because what you don't want to be doing is getting pad squeal, and then you have to take the wheel off and just apply some more grease. So I'm quite happy with that. It's got plenty of grease there. Just give my finger a little wipe. Always make sure that you don't have grease on your gloves. And essentially I'm just going to slide this in like this. I'm just going to push it against the disc face, and that is one pad in, and I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. Okay, with the pads now in and the calipers wound back, I can actually now put this back into position. There we go, and it's nice and easy, isn't it? Because the calipers wound back. So that is now in, and I've got my blue Loctite. So I'm just going to put a little bit on the ends of the here. We'll just get some fresh Loctite. So put some blue Loctite, make sure that it's in all of the grooves. You don't need to go crazy with this. It's got to just make sure that it's actually in the threads as such. Put a tiny little bit more. And then I can actually pop these into here, through the bracket there. Just get these in, and I'm going to obviously, I can't remember what the torque readings are for these caliper bolts, but I'm going to just go with the tight enough approach today. There is obviously going to be torque readings, but I'm going to go with just tight enough. Normally I would crack out the torque wrench, but it means I actually have to just double check what those torque readings are for these bolts. So I've got this in, it's fine. Just give myself a little white there, and then I'm going to, again, once again, just line that up, pop this bolt in, and you've got to make sure that it goes into the slider pins, okay? That is essentially now okay. And then tightening up is going to be the reverse of what the removal is. Removal was, I'm going to put my spanner on here, and I'm just going to get the appropriate sized socket, and I'm just going to tighten this up, do it by hand so I can actually feel the tightness. And then that is this side done. I'm going to get onto the other side and just do the same, repeat the process and do the same thing there, and then I know that the pads are now in, and then there'll be one final thing that I need to do before I go for a drive. So I'm just going to get this done and I'll tell you what that is. Okay, there's one final job now. Basically the brake pads are in on both sides, and there's one final job that I actually need to do, and that was the one that I was going to tell you that I do last, and that is to pump the brake pedal. Okay, so just gotta, so that went to the floor initially, now it's nice and solid. Okay, so that's fine. And when we have a look at the level, you should be able to see that we can actually then have a look at, make sure that the brake fluid level is also correct as well, and that is the job all done. And now it's time to go for a drive and see how these pads actually perform. So what are my thoughts on the EBC RP-X pads? They are a tremendous pad. I've been using them, as you can see from the brake dust on the rim, on the alloy. They're extremely good pads. Right out of as I came out of my street, the cold bite that the pads have are phenomenal. So I almost went through the windscreen because I hit the pedal as I would normally do with the stock pads, and the bite was so strong that it slowed me down really quickly. I went forward. Now that's from cold on new pads. As I've been driving with these pads, it's obviously got a little bit better in terms of you press the pedal and you've got a little bit of progressiveness before the pads actually give their full bite, or even 50-60% of their bite. Now in the beginning it was very difficult to heel and toe, so I was normally used to heel and towing with stock pads, and you can press the brake pedal down quite a fair bit and then blip the throttle. With these I was finding that I was touching the brakes and the car would slow down really quickly, making it a bit jerky with that heel and toe, but I've adjusted my approach or my technique, and probably the pads are bedded in as well. Now the way that you bed these pads in is actually you get the car up to 90 miles per hour and you slow down to 20 miles per hour, and you do that 6 times. So you slow down in quick succession. EBC call it snub. You snub the speed from 90 to 20 miles per hour, and you do that 6 times. Then you let the brakes cool, park the car up and let them completely cool overnight, or however many hours, and then the pads are actually bedded in. Now on the road obviously you can't get up to 90 miles per hour, so it's going to be very difficult to do that, but on the track that's something that you can easily do in 1 lap. So the pads work really, really well. I think they're a fantastic pad for A and B road work as well, so not necessarily just for track focused stuff, but on A and B roads they do give off a lot more dust than the standard stock Motorcraft or Ford pads, so that's something just to keep in mind. I probably have to buy a little bit more of that built Hamber wheel cleaner, because that's usually one of the best ways to get rid of this kind of brake dust, especially when it bakes on. You've got to keep on top of that. But in terms of any pad squeal, no, there's no pad squeal noise. Now I do have to say that I haven't driven the car extremely hard with these pads where I've built up really high temperatures. I can't imagine it being a problem in terms of brake fade or anything. If it is, then what I would do is make a separate video, and I'll update everybody if I have any problems in terms of like heat generation or any damage to the discs or whatever, but I don't anticipate that happening. So all in all, I'm very happy with the EBC RP-X pads. I hope you enjoyed this install and review video, and I'll hopefully see you again very soon.